All right. Thanks for tuning in today to All Things Division III Soccer with SimpleCoach and Jackie. That there is Jackie, and I am SimpleCoach. Today, have the great fortune of speaking with Kyle Dezotell, who's the head men's coach at Tufts University. We cover a wide range of topics. We're getting into these long form interviews like nobody's business. So, really great talk. Really got some insight into their season, into their successes, into some of their not so successful moments, but it gives you great sense as to what Tufts soccer is all about and what makes it so special. I hope you enjoy it, and we will see each other on the flip side. All right, Coach Dezotell, just thank you very much for joining me today on All Things Division III Soccer with SimpleCoach. Do appreciate you taking the time. Really excited to talk to you about your program, sort of how the season went, and some other hot topics. And so thanks for joining today.
You're very welcome. I'm happy to be here, and always happy that people pay attention to and support Division III soccer, as it's a passion of mine for sure.
Thank you. They pay more attention to you than me. So, hey, maybe we could just begin. You seem to, you're relatively new to Tufts. Maybe you could just talk about your coaching journey, your soccer journey, where you played and how you ended up at Tufts.
It's interesting. Everyone ends up following significantly different paths, it seems. And as I'm now 41 and trying to help mentor some younger assistants and some friendships I have as other coaches navigate their own path, the thing that stands out to me is it seems like there isn't just one path to ultimately get where you end up or where you want to be. There's so many different ways to do it. Mine's different, I think, than most that you see these days who end up at, maybe this higher academic, higher end of Division III soccer. But I grew up in Vermont, middle of nowhere, Vermont. Actually ski raced and played soccer throughout my childhood and even in college. I actually played 2 sports in college, so I'm always a big proponent for multi-sport athletes, even as I
not something common these days.
Yeah, and I've always felt like it'd be quite hypocritical of me if I wasn't an advocate for that, as it was something that I did. I ski raced and played soccer in college. So I went to Middlebury College. Loved my experience. Got to play for the legendary coach Dave Sayward, who's my biggest mentor to this day. And there's a number of, we'll probably discuss at some point, but there's a number of Middlebury College alums that are in the college coaching world now. Which is interesting. And I certainly didn't know when I was in college that I wanted to be a coach, actually. When you go to schools like Middlebury or Tufts or any of these types of schools, like there are a lot of other options, and a lot of other ways to probably make money. And I chose the option where that isn't the reality, most likely. And us Middlebury alums that are in the coaching world certainly joke about that often, that we were just too dumb to use our degrees, and that's why we became coaches. We joke, So anyway, I left college, and I'd ski raced and played soccer throughout college, and maybe in hindsight, I was an okay ski racer and an okay soccer player, and maybe I would have been a little better at one or the other had I focused a little more. But I finished school, and I actually tried to play. And I was a good Division III soccer player, and that became quite apparent in the one summer that I tried to make it as a player, and played in the USL. And I think at the end of the summer, I think I had earned a grand total of like $2,000.
Yeah.
And thought, man, this doesn't feel like professional athletics to me.
Yeah.
And borrowing money from my mom and dad and to pay rent and drive a car and have gas, and I was like, man. A couple of things. One, I didn't have any money, and 2, I realized my lack of athleticism as the soccer kept getting better and better. I wasn't getting any faster, and so I got into coaching. I got very, very lucky. I lived in Burlington, Vermont at the time. I was playing in the PDL. and a coach at St. Michael's College, which is a Division II school in Vermont, plays in the Northeast 10. I just happened to run into one day. He was like, "What are you doing?" And it was August, and I said, "Honestly, I have no idea. I was playing this summer." And so I became an assistant coach, very, very part-time. And it was a good experience for me because St. Michael's is in a really tough situation where it's a non-scholarship school that competes in a scholarship league in the Northeast 10. So I've gone from Middlebury College where like every team wins. It's a really fun environment. Coaches are happy, athletes are happy, to St. Michael's where like every team loses and it's a really tricky environment. And so I got a neat experience that first year of like what it would take to work really hard and how important having really good players is. And if the players that you have aren't as good as the players that you're playing against, it's going to be tough to win soccer games. And so between that St. Michael's job, I took a club soccer job with a club that's near and dear to my heart, and I worked for 10 years in Vermont called Park Post Soccer Club. So between those two jobs, and as many of us do, find other ways to make some money. I actually worked a factory job. So I took my Middlebury degree and put on my jeans and my work boots, and I worked from 7 to noon.
Nice.
Yeah, I was fortunate. My father was a plant manager for a factory in the greater Burlington area, so he was, whether he pulled strings or whatnot, but I was, up at 6 a.m. working a factory job from 7 to noon, and then I'd go over to St. Mike's and coach, be there from about 1 to 6 o'clock, and then I'd go coach club soccer, and kind of what probably most of us have done. And then, so the next summer, I got really, really lucky. It's a very small school, Division III school called Johnson State College, in the middle of nowhere, Vermont, which is now actually called Northern Vermont University Johnson, something like that. In August, their coach left. And so Johnson State College was looking for a head coach like on August 15th. I think preseason probably started 5 days later. And certainly because of my mentor, because of Dave Sayward, because of his influence and the impact he could have. And to be fair, Johnson was a part-time job at the time. This is 17, 18 years ago. I was hired as a Division III head coach. I think I was 23 years old.
Wow.
Which really forced me to grow up quickly. And what I found is, like, I talk about the path and there not being any obvious path for anyone. Seems like most people who end up at schools like Tufts have gone more the Division I coaching route, whether they were players in Division I or whether they coached in Division I. And I never have. I'm the rare exception that I've never been in Division I for a second, and have somehow made it to a Tufts University, one of the best schools and programs in the country in Division III. But I really learned quickly. My first year at Johnson State, it truly was like taking over a high school program. We were 3-14-3. I think we had about 16 players. I remember I took over the team, came into preseason. I think we had like 14 players day one of preseason. And so we were just waiting for the general student body to arrive and have walk-on tryouts. And we were taking kids that like probably truly had played JV high school soccer. And after that season, it was a good experience for me. I was so new and green to it all. And I think I probably just ran the same drills and sessions that my college coach had run. And I realized, and my college coach, Dave Sayward, gave me incredible advice. And he told me that the second I got that first head coaching job, he said, if you want to be a great coach, have great players. And so, early in that first season at Johnson State, I just knew that recruiting was going to be the most important thing. And I don't want to say I gave up on the team, because I certainly didn't in that first year, but I truly started to recruit for next year, like in September. And so we brought in about 10 players. And we went in 1 year, we went from 3-14-3, and I think we finished 8th or 9th in the league. To the next year, we went 8-6-4, and we won the league.
Wow.
And that became, we had the conference rookie of the year. I think we probably had the second, the runner up and the third and the fourth rookie of the year as well in the conference. And that was just a really impactful moment in my career where the importance of recruiting became very evident. And so after 2 years at Johnson State, the Norwich University job opens, and Norwich is a military school in Vermont. Does have a civilian population. And it was probably a little bit above my coaching level at that point, and I was fortunate enough that the athletic director, Tony Mariano, who's one of my mentors and who's actually retiring this year after like 40 years at Norwich. He's a great man. he hired me, and I think I was 25 years old, to take over a pretty good job. Like, at Norwich is a type of team that, outside of the NESCAC, often one of the better New England soccer teams, and can sometimes sneak into the top 10 in the regional rankings and those types of things. And so I coached
big knockoff of a game, right? Like one game a year, they surprise somebody. Yeah.
Absolutely. I mean, Norwich has beaten Middlebury occasionally, very occasionally, I think probably 3 or 4 times in their history. But one of those, one of those Division III New England teams outside of the NESCAC that can be very, very good. If you see them in the first round of the NCAA tournament, like, you're stressed about it. And so it was a really good job for a 25-year-old kid who really at that point still had no idea what I was doing, most likely. Had a couple really good teams. We won an ECAC. This is 15 years ago, and the ECAC was still I think it still exists, but I think it was a bigger deal then. And we won a ECAC championship, New England ECAC championship in 2007. Won a conference championship, won some NCAA tournament games in 2008. And then I coached there for 10 years total, and became an assistant athletic director. It was truly in one of those points after 10 years and being a Vermonter and had been in Vermont my whole life. I was at that crossroads of, like, I either probably stay at Norwich for the rest of my career because it's, I've built a good life. I like the life of coaching in Vermont, and I'd got into administration a little bit. But there was something in the back of my mind where I knew that I wanted to try to compete at a higher level as a coach. And I always, as a player, I wanted to, at Middlebury College, we wanted to compete to try to win national championships. And so that was something in my mind. And so I guess it was like 5 or 6 years ago now, I decided I would make a move because I wanted to see if I could get to that next level. I ended up at Manhattanville College. Again, my path is interesting. I ended up at Manhattanville College, just outside of New York City, for a year. Got some unique experiences there with Manhattanville. Often has a number of international players. And so we had a bunch of Scandinavian players, Swedish and Norwegian kids who were really, really talented. Had really good kids, and many I'm still in contact with today, but they were also, many of them in college in the States, kind of having given up on soccer. Like, they had their soccer experience, and they came to play while they went to college and in and around New York City, right? After, and that one for me, I actually really enjoyed my time at Manhattanville. The trickiest part, and I don't even know if I should say this out loud, but the trickiest part is, like, living in Westchester County, New York, on a Division III coach's salary. And at the point in my life where I was about to get married and start a family, and so after a year and a half, just one season, but I think we had 2 spring seasons, the Ithaca college job opened. And I remembered Ithaca from my college recruiting days in the late 90s. It was like this program that was a top 25 program and in the NCAA tournament. And I had heard great things about it. And kids from Vermont, where I was from, often, would go to Ithaca, and I'd heard about what a cool college town it was. So I truly threw my heart and soul into trying to get the Ithaca college job. And I was lucky enough to do so. And sure enough, it was everything that I thought it would be. The program was in a spot where they'd had a longtime coach for like 30 years, and someone came in for 2 years, and he had started to up the recruiting a little bit. And it was in a decent spot, but when I got there, we just needed a little bit of fine tuning. And so I came in, and I kind of ruled with an iron fist my first year. I think I cut like 10 players my first year, because Ithaca was a program that, like, should have been a top 25 program. And most of the sports there are. And there were a lot of really great kids on the team, but I was just trying to make it so there were a lot of really great kids who also wanted to be Liberty League champions and be in the NCAA tournament and be top 25 team. And so I was pretty harsh that first year. I'll admit. But pretty quickly we turned the program around, and I think in like the 5 years prior, Ithaca had maybe had beaten one Liberty League opponent, and then 2 years into it, we were in the Liberty League championship game. And then my third year there, we were in the second round of the NCAA tournament, competing against Amherst. And again, that was like one of those days where I thought we were really good at Ithaca. I thought, like, we could beat Amherst, and we just didn't. They were better than us, and they ended up losing in the national championship that year to Tufts. So then Ithaca truly is, like, it's an amazing place, amazing school. I'm at a top 25 program, a really cool college town, married, have had a child, starting to build a life, and the Tufts job opens. And I honestly didn't even consider it at first. I was like, I don't think I can get it. I don't think I'm, I don't know that I've never been in Division I, which often these schools look for. Not an Ivy League guy. And then I got a phone call from my mentor, Dave Sayward, and also from the previous coach here, Josh Shapiro, who's now at Harvard, who just said, something to the effect of, just so you know, your name is bouncing around. Are you interested? Wow. And that I remember being at the coaches convention actually, and the Tufts athletic director called me, and that was a big moment. And obviously there were a bunch of people in the conversation at that point.
Right.
But again, I had left Norwich University 5 or 6 years prior to try to get to that type of level. And then from that moment forward, it became oh my gosh, like my name is actually bouncing around in this conversation. I'm 100% going for this. I'm from New England. We would love to have our family in New England. And It became an absolute no-brainer. And obviously, that you're going to take on, you're taking on quite the program and the history. And Josh Shapiro, who's, he's a Middlebury alum as well, and we're dear friends. And, he's truly has to be considered one of the greatest, if not the greatest, Division III men's soccer coach ever. And so there's, obviously big expectations and those things, but it was something that having, I've got that question along the way, like, what was it, like, why would you ever take this job, right? Like, how can Tufts ever be better than they were? 4 national championships in 6 years. It doesn't happen in sports these days. And I just, it's something I was never afraid of taking on that burden, because I never saw it as a burden. Like when you've coached at the absolute lowest level of Division III soccer,
you would love that burden.
When you look at these, these Massey ratings and whatnot, and there's 430 teams, and like truly Johnson State College, when I first started, was, I don't know if those rankings existed in those days. It was probably 425 out of 430. So to me, like, to take over a team like Tufts, okay, if we lose in the Final Four, if we lose in the Elite Eight, we lose in the Sweet Six, like, oh my gosh, what an amazing opportunity, and not something I was ever going to be afraid of, for sure.
Did you have anybody who tried to dissuade you to take on Tufts? I mean, you were still relatively young, right?
Yeah, I mean, it was 2 years ago. I was 39. But I also, because of how early I started and became a head coach, like I'd been a head coach for 15 or 16 years already. I just have I don't know. I think I've coached like 400 college soccer games already at 40 years old. So, I mean, I certainly had a lot of conversations and like, like truly, can you go up from where Tufts is? Like 4 national champ, like, I don't know. And I've said that all along. Like, I didn't expect to come in here and win 4 national championships in 6 years. I think like you have to, there's a lot of luck that goes into winning a conference championship, a national championship, all of these things. But I do believe in myself as a coach. I have plenty of confidence in myself and what I can bring to a program. And I do think we'll compete to win national championships every year. That's ultimately my goal. And when I was hired, that's certainly what the athletic director, he's a really good man and a really good leader. And he, I asked him what the expectations were, and he's like, don't get me wrong. Like the expectation is not that you win the national championship every year, but we do think we should be competitive to win the NESCAC and competitive to win the national championship every year. And I believe Tufts is absolutely set up that way. And so that's my goal. And ultimately, and hopefully I'll be here for 20 years and then retire. And do I expect to hopefully win a national championship or 2 or 3? Like, absolutely. I think we can do that. And that's my goal. And I believe that I can do that as a coach as well. It's
okay to have the bar set high, right? Like that's always a great expectation, whether you're a coach or a player. Just, I always wonder, like, how high is the bar in a situation like that, right? Like,
I mean, it's high. Like you feel it for sure. I mean, we won a NESCAC championship and we lost in the Elite Eight. And there's part of it that's like, wow, that's kind of a down year for Tufts, which is insane. And I will say, no one at Tufts feels that way in terms of the administration. Our alums are fantastic. They, like they're so proud of what we've done. The other side of the coin is like, and obviously I sell it to myself after we lose, right? But like a NESCAC championship in the Elite Eight, like that's arguably Tufts' 5th best season ever in 100 years of men's soccer. And so I just like, I will never look at that as a bad year. I can't. It's so hard to win national championships, and like only one of us gets to out of 430 of us.
Like you said, there's so many things that go into a championship year, and all of those things have to align at the same time, but also at the right time. Otherwise, you're going to be like everybody else. But yeah, and like I said, I'm sure if you're ranked 425th, you would love to have the burden. You would love to have the expectation that, hey, you're going to make the NCAAs, you're going to win a national championship. Like that would be an awesome position to be in, even right at a program, because not everybody can say that.
100%. And there again, certainly I had lots of conversations, throughout the process, and the process took a couple of months, and so definitely have those conversations with people, and it's just like, no, like I have been at the bottom. This doesn't scare me. Like what would scare me is being 39 years old and going back to being the coach at Johnson State College, who's 3-14-3. Like that would be scary. Yeah. This is not scary. We have every resource here. I've been at all those other places to ultimately end up at a place like this where every player in the country that might play Division III soccer will consider us.
Yeah. Let me ask you, just as an aside, the 3 years at Ithaca, could you have seen, if Tufts doesn't open up, could you have seen yourself at Ithaca for a longer period? Like, could you have been there for 15 years? I mean, is that the type of environment?
It is. The athletic director, Susan Bassett, is again a mentor of mine. I've been lucky to work for really great people. And one thing I learned from her was she sets the standards really, really high, and that's something that I believe in too. You just set, her ideas. You set the standards as high as you possibly can go, and people are going to reach them or they're not. And the ones that do will come along with you, and the ones that don't will maybe get off the boat. And so that's certainly something that I carry with me as a coach. But Ithaca's an amazing athletic department. Truly a top 15, in the Directors Cup type school. For me, obviously the idea of the NESCAC,
sure.
It's I played in the NESCAC, and it's interesting, you do get a lot of these people, especially in the Northeast, that are NESCAC centric, and for me, working outside of the NESCAC for 17 years, I was the opposite. When the NESCAC would get 4 or 5 teams in the NCAA tournament, and I'd be we'd lose in the Liberty League final at Ithaca and didn't get a bid to the NCAA tournament. I didn't agree. And now that I'm here, I've completely gone the other direction in 2 years. But no, Ithaca's an amazing place. I was very, very fortunate to work there. I truly could have worked there forever. This was it was too good.
Right. Yeah. Like I gotta assume, like, these are coveted positions, right? Like tough, like there, you can name them, right? The ones that you're like, man, if that opens up, you almost feel compelled to try, right? Because if you don't, right, you never.
Yeah, know. There were after my second year at Ithaca, there were a couple opportunities that came up. And it was like I went through a process with, obviously with my family, and I made a list of like which ones would I truly consider, and like which ones would I probably jump for if the opportunity came. And there were really only 3 or 4, and Tufts was obviously one of them.
Yeah. Hey, so you're hired in 2020, and everyone gets put on ice for COVID, right? And so 2020, this past season ends up being your first one, correct? Your first full season. All right. So knowing, even though not that it's a burden, but you have your own expectation about Tufts. Yeah. What was it like being a new guy, the new coach at a much heralded program? It's your first season right out of the gate, because you didn't have that first season back in 2020, when you were hired.
My first year was, it was wild. I was truly hired like 5 days before the pandemic, before the world shut down. I was hired, and I think I didn't step foot on campus for 6 months after being hired. So I started working, in some ways it was okay, because we had to sell a house and buy a house and move to the Boston area and all of those things. But even, the 2020 year, it was we were allowed to do so little here at Tufts and NESCAC. We were in groups of 5 for most of the year, no larger than 5, wearing masks outside. I think maybe first semester we had 15 or 16 kids on campus, and then the second semester we more or less had the other 15 or 16 kids who were like tired of being at home. So we never had, we really never had our team on campus that whole year. But obviously as the new coach, you're trying to establish relationships and get to know people and get to know your team and imprint yourself on it a little bit. No, I think, in full transparency, this year was tricky in a lot of ways because, you are taking over someone else's program. I have a lot of belief in myself as a coach, but also in some ways, you're not going to show up to Tufts and just like start changing everything and throwing things out the window like it hadn't worked, right?
No more cones.
Yeah, exactly. And obviously Josh Shapiro is a friend of mine, and I have so much respect for him, and I've supported Tufts over the years and watched, his team win national championships and been cheering for Tufts as my friend's been a coach. But in a lot of ways there were, we had 7 seniors who postponed their lives too, to come back for one more semester and chase a national championship. And these guys, at places like Tufts, like they usually have jobs lined up before they leave here or grad school opportunities. And, some guys had convinced their jobs, which again, super fortunate, convinced their jobs that, asked them if they could start rather than start in the summer. Could they start in January? And a couple places said yes, which was unbelievable. And so now we just we had all these guys coming back, and in some ways, obviously as coach, you're gonna have some differences in the previous coach, and you're gonna have things that you might see differently or do differently, or just training might have some differences, or whatever it may be. And a lot of ways this year was kind of like trying to give a similar experience to some of those upperclassmen. And then on the other side of that, at times you did feel, and you're empathetic for some of your younger players, because all of a sudden there's 5 classes of players on your team. And so these guys that have been recruited and, think that they're going to come in and potentially impact a program really early, they show up and there's 7 23-year-old super seniors, and it's tricky and hard to get on the field. It's hard to get on the field as a freshman anyway. And all of a sudden when you have 5 classes of players, it's even harder. And, we had a bunch of injuries and all these things. So our year was unique. If you were inside of our program, and like I say this cautiously because we absolutely could have won the national championship, like Con wins the national championship. They beat us 5-4 in this wild game that I know we're going to talk about. And we had the talent to win the national championship. But if you were inside of our program and like knew the injuries we dealt with and knew some of the things that were going on we truly never had our whole team play in any game. And often we were missing 3 to 6 starters every game, which again shows the depth that our program has had, and the testament to Coach Shapiro recruiting and how good we actually were. But there were some tricky moments for sure, and times when guys who haven't trained in a month all of a sudden get healthy, and you look at the freshman or sophomore who's kind of been playing in that spot. But there's the 23-year-old super senior who's won 2 national championships, who's like, all right, coach, I'm ready today. And so some tricky things there that you had to deal with as a coach for sure. Ultimately, in terms of giving our team the best opportunity to try to win an NESCAC championship and try to win a national championship, there's things you always question as a coach for sure, and putting a player here or there. But ultimately, I think we actually handled things quite well in terms of what was the best chance for us to win the national championship this year.
Yeah, I will say that you didn't make my life easy with those injuries, because as I was trying to research for our conversation today, I was trying to figure out what like the real starting 11 was, and every time, and I'm like, man, what, he probably has 30 guys that he could just sort of interchange, and I always think that that's such a luxury if you could do that and still reach those heights, right?
Yeah.
All right, so you mentioned your best conference in the country, right? NESCAC. 4 teams this year. Yeah, 4. Yeah, it's just a fantastic conference, and obviously Connecticut being the national champions, you were the previous year. Huge success. They got the 4 stars on the scarf behind you, right, for the national championships in the 7 years. And so you mentioned it earlier, but could you just talk about what you're just sort of generally going into your first year, what your expectations were for the team? Like if you could have said, hey, I just want to, this is what this is what I'm telling the players. Like, we're
Yeah.
competing, we're going for a national championship, and you're being your first real year at Tufts, your expectations for the team.
Yeah. I think you'd be remiss to say that, like, we weren't always competing for the national championship. I think everyone here knows that that's the ultimate goal. I think it always will be. But I also, you really try to limit how much you talk about that. And I don't know if we ever spoke about it. I think we tried to, you say things like, let's prepare today like a national championship team would prepare, or let's try to train like a national championship team would train. But in terms of talking about it, I mean, this is cliche, and I know every coach has their own thing, but my mantra for the last 17 years has been go 1-0 today. I try to live my own personal life like that, and I try to live, I want our players to live like that. And that's, I'm sure Coach Shapiro had something of his own prior to me being here, but I mean, it's on my wall, it's on the locker room wall. I just really believe you try to go 1-0 today, and at the end of the day, if you don't, then so be it, and you go to bed and you wake up the next morning and you try to go 1-0 again. I think with 7 super seniors coming back and all these guys who had won national championships, like, yeah, don't get me wrong, like, our team knew that we were competing to win the national championship, and that was the ultimate goal. And if we didn't reach it, in some ways there is some sense of failure there. But I knew we were good, but I also know we play in the NESCAC, right? And like, a team that finishes in 9th place in the NESCAC is
still darn good,
potentially a top 25 team, like, genuinely.
Yeah.
And I rate, like, having been outside the NESCAC, I'm not just a NESCAC guy. That's not who I am. There are a lot of other really good conferences, really good Division III teams. I coach in the Liberty League, which I consider to be a really good league in the Northeast. And teams in the Liberty League can absolutely compete and beat NESCAC teams. But I know we play in the NESCAC, so it's going to be really, really hard. And you always feel like you're going to have to beat probably 2 NESCAC teams in the NCAA tournament to get there. And it's going to be tricky. It's not going to get easier. We just hired 2 new coaches into the league in Williams and Trinity. And we're certainly not getting worse as a conference.
Yeah.
But I think then, as the season goes, and all of a sudden, before the first game of the season even happens, I think we were down maybe 3 starters. I think Alex Ratson and Max Jacobs, who are like 2 forwards who could potentially be All-Americans for us, are just basically out the first month of the season, and you don't know if they're going to come back. And then as the season goes on, just so many other injuries that you're always a little bit doubting it as a coach, but then you also know, like, our 18th guy is really good, really, really good. I mean, I don't want to say that we overachieved, but, like, truly, we played every game all season long without 3 to 6 starters. And, like, the question will always be, if you had everyone, how good could you have been? But I also think that does a disservice. Like, Conn College is really, really good. And had we had all of our starters, they absolutely still could have beat us. Could have Washington College, in the round earlier, or Stevens in the second round. Like, all of those teams are really good. So had we had everyone, who knows? But just knowing how much we missed at every point in the season, like, I think actually what we did was incredibly impressive. And a lot of our younger guys and some of the role players really stepped up into bigger roles this year. And ultimately, I mean, we wanted to win the NESCAC and we wanted to win the national championship. And we came pretty darn close to doing both.
Yeah. So, all right. So I have to ask, aside, obviously injuries are sort of the uncontrollables, but when you got together in August and you started looking at the team again, fresh eyes from different set of eyes looking at the squad, were you thinking, did you have any sort of spots where you're like, I am worried about, my defensive third and how organized we are, and do we have guys who are going to say, or, the one that everyone always says is scoring. Like, I'm not sure where our goals are going to come from. But were there any areas of your team where you're like, if I could fix, this is what I need to fix to make the run?
I mean, the most obvious. Yeah. The most obvious one for us was our goalkeeper position, to be fair. the previous goalkeepers who had won the 2018-2019 national championship were no longer part of our program. And we had a really good returning sophomore in Jacob Tots, who's a Houston Dynamo kid, and then a freshman, Eric Lauda, from De Anza in California, that we liked a lot, through the recruiting process. And one of those that, maybe the pandemic helped our recruiting process, because I think he would be in Division I if the pandemic hadn't happened. And he was very much on our radar when the pandemic started, and so we were able to get him, and maybe some others kind of stopped recruiting because they hadn't seen him enough or whatever it may have been. So that was the biggest question, because we felt like we were pretty solid through the spine. We were pretty solid at center back. We were pretty solid. We were really solid.
Really solid.
we were spoiled in midfield. We have guys that played 10 minutes a game that are starters everywhere else. And will be next year for sure. And then we felt good up top, if you have Max Jacobs, Alex Ratson, and Maticano coming, playing, you feel like you have, arguably the best front three in the country. In the end, it didn't pan out. I think Alex Ratson and Max Jacobs might have, between them, played 200 minutes all year. So, but yeah, the question mark was certainly the goalkeeper position. And Eric Lauda was as good as advertised, and I know there's a bunch of really good goalkeepers, but we genuinely feel like we have a top 10 goalkeeper in Division III already, and he's just a freshman. So the sky's the limit for him, and he gave the team a lot of confidence. And I think our backup goalkeeper, Jacob Tots, I think he's, I would argue he's probably a top 5 NESCAC goalkeeper, and he's just in a really tough situation, which. As you know, that goalkeeper is a really tough position that sometimes only one plays.
That's the issue. And I'm not, and to boot, I'm not one of those guys who likes to, okay, you get a half and then the other guy gets a half, or you get a game and the other guy gets a game. Nah, that to me is a little too disruptive. So anyhow. So yeah, what surprised you the most out of your guys this season? Is it just filling those the guys who stepped up to fill in for injuries, or is there something else?
I think we just never made excuses. We got to the NESCAC tournament, and it would have been very, very easy to to just say, we're gonna sports and the psychology of it, and it would have been very easy to say, we're just going to kind of sandbag, and if we can win in the NESCAC tournament, we'll win. But we're playing without. We played without Maticano. We played without Max Jacobs. We played without Alex Ratson. Played without Aiden Welsh. Played without Zach Siegelstein. At times we played without Biagio Paoletta. We played without Gibson Camp. We truly played without arguably 7 starters throughout the NESCAC tournament. And what impressed me the most was we never made an excuse, and we just felt like we had enough in our team to win each day. And it was truly like, let's win this game, and if we get past this game, we'll worry about the next one. And I give our team a lot of credit, because again, there was a ton of pressure, and you always knew all year that those 7 super seniors, they didn't come back to win it. This sounds silly, but they didn't come back to win an NESCAC championship. They came back to win the national championship. And so you knew that there was always that pressure at least in their minds, which is a lot of pressure to deal with. And in our sport, where you can have a bad 15 minutes and all of a sudden you lose, right? You hear about it in the Champions League all the time, which is just saying don't have that crazy 15 minutes, which ultimately we had. But I just give our kids a ton of credit. We just never made any excuses, and it was always let's just find a way, and it'll be next man up. And the NESCAC tournament was the biggest testament to that. We played freshmen and sophomores who, some of them hadn't played, I don't know if they had played 100 minutes all season, and all of a sudden they probably played 200 minutes in the NESCAC tournament. And yeah, we were able to win a first round game against Bowdoin, and then we were able to beat Middlebury in a really tight game that could have gone their way. Certainly could have gone either way. They hit the post and barred it. It may or may not have crossed the goal line, and from our perspective, it did not. And
the video is inconclusive.
Exactly. Thankfully, the Division III video quality is not good enough to show anything. And then we play Con on their home field, and they're really, really good. And kudos to Con College. What a cool what an amazing program that they've put together, but also, again, and I played in the NESCAC 20 years ago, so just how different Conn College has become, and like that program. And there were thousands of people at those games that weekend, and believe me, they were having fun. They were coming in and out of the dorms, and the kids were having fun on the campus that weekend. And so it was a fun environment to play in. And we just said on that day with the team that we had, we were going to give up some possession, and we were just going to be solid defensively and look to counter. And again, luck plays a role. And to this day, like, I think I don't mind saying this publicly, like, we fouled them and they should have had a penalty when it was 1-0 Tufts. And
I remember that one. Yeah, you guys, that was like, I was right here. This was my reaction, like, what? That's not a call?
Yeah, and you get your luck, right? Like, there's the moment in the Elite Eight game with the handball and like the potential red card that, like, our eyes, like, should have been a red card, and all of a sudden we're playing 11 against 10 in the Elite Eight. But I also, the coach, like, if you've done this for long enough, you remember, like, it all evens out.
Yeah, comes out in the wash.
We should have given up a penalty in the NESCAC final, and the score likely would have been 1-1, and who knows what would have happened in that moment. So just really impressed with our group. And also, that because of the in and out and the start and stop of some of the seasons that our guys had due to injuries, there were some tricky things that some of our players had to deal with, where one game you played 70 minutes and the next game he might not have got off. I know Mikey Brady is a forward for us. He's a sophomore, and all your sophomores are kind of freshmen because they don't have a year of college soccer. I don't remember which game it was, but there was a game where I played him 0 minutes. And other games during the season, he played 80 minutes. And so I just give our guys so much credit for handling that. And truly, I'm sure there were some difficulties, because I know as a player, you always try to think back what that's like as a player, and it's not fun, and that. But ultimately, I do believe our program, the single most important thing, and I think this is carried from Coach Shapiro and will continue to carry over, with me, as long as I do my job and continuing a culture and continuing to, increase in the standard in our culture, is the only thing that matters is winning. And whether you're a senior, whether you're a freshman, whether you play 0 minutes or 110 minutes, the only thing that matters is the team winning. And that will be the most fun thing at the end of the game.
Right. Pretty good. So tell me, you mentioned some of your super seniors, you have some spectacular ball players there. Bar none, right? I still think Calvin Arrow is, for a guy, his presence is something that you don't see a lot of. I haven't seen yet on other teams. But so, how comfortable do you feel, like, okay, they're graduating and you have this bench that can fill that role? Are you feeling pretty confident that you're going to be able to fill those spots?
No, we think we're going to stink.
That's not what you want to say.
We're a major underdog. That's what we want everyone else to feel like. No, we feel really good about our team. We have incredible players, and a lot of guys who feel like, their time to take on a bigger role is now. And you have the sting of having lost, right? Which is again, we're not able to work with our kids in the off season. The NESCAC is allowing us to have a 5-week spring season, which will be April for us. But, like, I'm in the same building as our kids, and, like, I know that they're in here crushing workouts in the weight room and playing pickup and doing things. They have that stinging feeling from having lost, right? And they want to see if they can overcome that, and just become better soccer players. So, the short answer is, like, can you replace those guys? No. Biagio Paletta is the most warrior center back defender, toughest kid I've ever coached in my life. Yeah. He played most games, but Biagio, and I don't think he'll mind me saying this, like, he's an old man. He's got an old man's body, and he just dealt.
Breaks.
Yeah, but he dealt with it. But that's also who he is. He's hard, but he's really humble. I think the neatest thing about him is how hard he is, but also how much respect his opponents will have for him, because he's a really good kid, actually. He'll pick a guy up after he lays down a crunch. He actually built, it was interesting. I learned, that he actually built really good relationships with a lot of the forwards in the NESCAC, which is so weird to think about, but also really something that I respect about him a lot. And he was an amazing teammate. Derek Engie was, one of the best leaders I've ever had, if not the best leader. And this year I think he got a really great experience. He kept getting better as a player throughout college, and went from being a guy who maybe played 10 or 20 minutes a game to this year he played most minutes of every game and had an amazing season for us. And then Calvin, I mean, like you said, Calvin, I played when I was in college. Williams had this. They had this Jamaican youth national team train going to Williams College, and there were a number of them. But Kari Stevenson was one who ended up being the best, and Kari played for 12 years in MLS and got maybe 50 caps for Jamaica. And like, I know there's other good players in Division III, and you kind of are in your own little bubble, and we're in our New England region and those things. So I'm sure there are other good players out there. But I mean, Calvin, I've been in Division III as a player and a coach for 21 years. Yeah. And Calvin and Kari, for me, are in a class of their own. Calvin could be a pro, and he's ultimately chosen not to. And selfishly, I kind of wish he had tried it because he's good enough. But Calvin is as good as it gets in Division.
He's probably one of the most intelligent positional players I've watched this year. I watched I always say it, I watched 200 games. Don't ask why, but in the fall. Yeah. And positionally, there's a guy who, to me, gets the game, right? Like, he knows he doesn't have to run 20 yards because he's in the right spot, it seems, every time. Even when he scored goals, he's just in the right spot. And you don't see that, especially Division III. I think it tends to be a little bit more chaotic, and guys aren't as disciplined in their positions, but absolutely impressive. I guess, these guys you're losing in terms of leadership. Do you already have younger guys who are stepping up to be the team leaders? Not from the soccer perspective, but hey, we're competing for the national championship. The guys who are going to the other guys and saying, you have to get into the weight room, or you have to start training, you got to participate. You starting to see that emerge, or?
Yeah, I think something that exists here, which I really believe in, is our leadership model is very, very much player driven. I obviously think it's our duty as coaches to have a culture and have standards and have expectations, but ultimately the teams that have the most success are teams that where those kinds of things are often driven by the players, and we're really lucky here. And it's obviously in Division III, like, we would love to work with our players more than we're allowed to. And in the NESCAC, in most years, you're truly not allowed to work with your players other than from late August until, November or December. And you do see some unique leadership things happen because of the model of the kids truly are responsible for themselves and accountable for themselves throughout the off season. But we have good leaders. We have a leadership group within our program of younger guys, and so you hope it will just be a continuation and a train that by the time the guys kind of are juniors and seniors, you have the next leaders stepping up. And so we have I'm not concerned about leadership. I think we do obviously lose big leaders, but we have guys like Ian Daly and others who have already started to fill those voids. And we'll be fine in that regard.
I'm a big fan of Ian Daly as well. I think he's an outstanding ball player, like another one. So I got to ask the not controversial question, the self introspection question is, is there anything you thought you could have done better as a first year coach at Tufts? In hindsight, obviously.
Yeah, there's 1,000 things, right? That's coaching. You lose that game, and I'm sure we'll talk about that game, but we go behind 5-2, and all of a sudden I just throw caution to the wind, right? And naturally your players start to throw caution to the wind as well. And we went 4-2-4 for the last 30 minutes, and you throw Calvin Arrow up top as center forward, and he was just absolutely dominant. And you're like, oh, I wonder if I should have put Calvin Arrow at center forward the whole season. And little things like Travis Van Brewer, the kind of emergence of Derek Engie. Travis has always played as the 8 for Tufts. And he started as the 8 at the beginning of the season, but because of how well Derek was playing, and Derek and Calvin's partnership allowed Calvin to go higher up the field at times because Derek would sit, we ended up playing Travis at the 10, and he was incredibly selfless to basically change his position. I think it was fun for him because he got forward more and he had more opportunities to score and get assists, and that's where I actually think Travis is best. But I don't know. You base so much of your thinking on like what happened when it went wrong, right?
Yeah,
So
yeah.
in the last 30 minutes of that game, we put Eric Ingersoll and Travis Van Brewer on. There are only two midfielders. We were totally wide open, and they just started to dominate the game. But again, the coach who's done it for a while, you have the hindsight of also knowing like the game was just wild at that point. We were playing 4-4. Con was probably panicking because they're at close to a Final Four, as any player would be.
Yeah.
Wheels are coming off and you're just trying to hang on. So, there's things for sure. And kind of what I spoke about before, like there were tricky moments where, I mean, the guys, I think of like a couple of guys like Ethan Feigen and Anthony Bangdia, who were freshmen for us, who truly won us the NESCAC championship with how well they played at striker and as wingers in the NESCAC semifinal and final. And then the NCAA tournament starts and Max Jacobs is back and Mati Kano is back.
Yeah.
And all of a sudden they didn't play. They didn't come off the bench. And so, there's tricky things like that you feel bad about. But also some of those things are coaching, right? Like you have to make decisions. And, I've spent a lot of time since the season communicating with our guys that, there were hard things this year because of all the injuries and, tricky things where, we had guys were injured, so they couldn't train. And all of a sudden they're healthy, a month later. And like, you look at them and they're guys that have won 2 national championships and they're very good. But just tricky things that like, are those decisions fair to the freshmen and sophomores train every day and work really hard, and all of a sudden like now they're going back on the bench. So little things like that. But there's also a number of little things that I think we got right by maybe allowing a little more leeway than I normally would like. I mean, normally for me, you need to train every day. You need to train incredibly hard. The standard in training needs to be hard. This was just such a unique year with so many players on the roster and so many injuries that, I mean, if we had hard and fast rules about not playing guys who hadn't trained this year, I don't think we come anywhere close to where we ultimately end up. So a lot of little things. And taking over a program is always tricky and things where you're trying to not upset the apple cart too much. And so certainly some things from my perspective, starts to feel like your team more and more. And like now I've been here for 24 months and it's, it very much is starting to feel more like my team. And don't get me wrong, like every player we have, I would take them back, and I'd take back some of the ones that were on the 2019 team, the 2016 team, and all those guys, but definitely some tricky things. And you always, I think if you're being honest with yourself, and that's something that I pride myself on, like I'm not a coach who thinks it's that I'm the best coach out there, the smartest man, or have the greatest tactics, or I'm the greatest psychologist. I think I can always get better. I try to utilize my staff. And at the end of the day, like we didn't win the national championship and we were good enough to, so I'll question, 100 little things, both in that one game, but also throughout the season that, may or may not have made the difference ultimately.
All right, so let's shift to El Clasico of 2021, which was your games against Connecticut. At the beginning of the season, when you're looking at the NESCAC, did you think that Connecticut was going to be the toughest, probably the toughest opponent, and that you would be battling it out between you and them?
You knew that they'd be good, right? They were really good in 2019. Obviously, they had lost an incredible goalkeeper who's now playing playing for the Red Bulls too, and playing professional soccer. But I don't know. I mean, our conference is too good to focus on any one team. As much as it like Con wins the national championship, we also could have lost to Amherst, or we could have lost to Middlebury, or we could have lost to Wesleyan, or we could have lost to Colby or Bates or Trinity. All of these, every team we play is good. So did you know that Con would be the team to win the national championship? Absolutely not. But along with, probably Middlebury and Amherst and Con and Tufts, you assume that you probably think that maybe one of those teams will probably be in the Final Four. And Con they were bringing back Augie and MT Schuma, and I knew this. I had watched as much video as I could from previous years, and Steve Jonas is really good, and they've got a number of really good younger players, and so you knew they'd be good. But again, it takes so many pieces. And when I look back at all the, I mean, even our season to win the NESCAC, make it to the Elite Eight, like all the little pieces of luck and the moment here and there, and all those things that it takes to have you build your own luck for sure. And Con absolutely built their own luck through their hard work. I thought without a doubt they were the hardest working team that I saw this year. And ultimately, I think that is why they won the national championship, and that paid off.
Yeah. All right. So you mentioned you played them twice regular season in the NESCAC. You win one, you lose one. When you get to that title match, you win the NESCAC. When you get to that game, I mean, did you take anything from the game that you lost? Right, the first game you played them, did you take anything from that you said, okay, we're going to play this way because this is how we're going to beat Con? Or did you just sort of say, all right, now we just have to really up the intensity?
I mean, when you play Con, I mean, Ruben does a great job. He's a really good coach.
Great guy.
Great guy. They played differently than most NESCAC teams, right? And he's about positional play, and they push guys high up the field, and they'll build out of the back, and they'll spray diagonal balls. And so you have to, I think if you played Con without focusing a bit on how you're going to play against them, you'd probably lose. And so, but we're also Tufts, right? And we feel like we want to be Tufts, and we want to be ourselves, and we want to have our own identity. And also we want to be confident in what we're doing and not change completely. I mean, there were certainly things that we learned, and we felt like in the NESCAC tournament, the best way was to give up some of the field and give up some of the possession and create space in behind them. And they are very open because of how they play. And so if you can turn them over around midfield, all of a sudden you're getting a lot of 1v1 and 2v2 chances. And that's ultimately how we scored the 2 goals in that game. But again, like each game is its own thing. Each game takes a bit of luck. Con absolutely could have, you win that game, you just know, I mean, these are 2 really good teams. On a different day, Con could have won the NESCAC championship as well. So, you try to learn from each game. But I mean, we were a little bit because of personnel and a little bit because of teams that we would play. We were kind of always back and forth between a 4-3-3 and a 3-5-2 all year. And so I think those are some of the question marks, and those are like question marks. We in the Elite Eight game, we played a 3-5-2, and in hindsight, maybe that was a poor choice on my end. We didn't have Biagio. Biagio couldn't go, and so all of a sudden, maybe the best defender in the country isn't playing in the game. So should we have gone to a back 4? But again, it's hard to say because we had the lead twice in the first half. So you're like, okay, apparently we were getting it right for a while.
Yeah.
And so there's moments, but you learn from each game. But I don't know. I know we're going to talk about this, but I mean that game was. I mean, it was ridiculous. I would have.
To that. We'll get to the ridiculousness of it. Like what? Once you win the title, how does it like emotionally? How does it feel then? Hey, now we're going into the NCAAs. Were you sort of flying high? Like, oh my gosh, we won the NESCAC. Now we're going to have this run into the tournament. I mean, did it boost your confidence, or did you start thinking to yourself, oh my gosh, we have the depth to go as far as we want?
Honestly, we were such a question mark still at that point with injuries and guys coming back or guys not coming back that we're still kind of handling some things and juggling. We still didn't know what our team would be. Honestly, we didn't know what our team would be on any given day all season until the day before. And some guys would feel great on Tuesday and Wednesday, and by Thursday or Friday they weren't able to. Which I totally trust our guys, and I think every player on our team would have gone had they gone. I mean, Alex Ratson's a good example. He was injured the whole first half of the season, comes back, plays against Babson, scores the game-winning goal in overtime, and then we find out like 2 days later that he actually did have a torn quad, and so he was out the rest of the year. And to his credit, like he toughed it out and played 30 minutes against Babson and won us a game with a torn quad. So, I think I don't know. It's funny, the NESCAC teams have now won 6 of the last 7 national championships, and only one of those 6 has won the NESCAC championship. I'm a sports guy, and so I I mean, I remember like Big East basketball. If you wanted to win the national championship, the worst thing you could do was win the Big East championship because there were more
Kiss of
games
death,
and
right?
more wear and tear. And
Yeah.
I remember UConn bucked that trend 20 years ago and won the Big East championship and then won the national championship finally. But truly, only one team, Tufts. I can't remember if it was 2018 or 2019, but Tufts 2019. That's the only team who's won the NESCAC championship and the national championship. So, we were confident because we knew we were good. And you could sense a different feeling in training as the NCAA. Like you have, it can go too far for sure, but I think there's such great humility within this program that it doesn't ever come close to going too far. But you have confidence if you've been there and done that, right? You have some confidence that you can go and do it again. So the guys were excited and ready for the NCAA tournament to get there because, for better or worse, again, we had 7 guys who came back to win it, and all of a sudden, like they had made it at that point.
Yeah.
They were there.
All right, so let's get to the crazy game. So, what were your thoughts going into the Elite Eight, where you're playing Connecticut at home? Like, what were your thoughts? And then the second question to this is, if you were a betting man, like, would you have expected 9 goals out of that game?
My thoughts were.
I didn't. I'm fully. I was like, this is going to go 0-0. I went 1-1. It's going to PKs. That was my initial gamble.
Yeah. And my thoughts were really glad we're here. We could have lost the day before against Washington College, who had a really good team and at times outplayed us as the game was tied. And Mati Kano, whether it was a cross that floated into the back post or whether it was a shot from 40 yards on the sideline.
I didn't know how he would celebrate. I was like, hey, oh, okay.
To be fair, I said to him after the game, I said, that was a shot, right? And he was like, Coach, no chance. I was like, come on, you need to claim that. So I bet 20 years from now he'll claim that as a shot.
Yeah.
As I would.
Great goal.
But we were going into the con game. I mean, you're playing for the Final Four, right? So it has a different feeling. We had played first. We'd watched them play. Redlands had given them a really great game. Con had done what they did all season long and scored at the death. They scored at like 89-30 on a corner kick. I think that's maybe underappreciate. Like Con plays this style and positional play, and they're expansive and all these things. But when I look at why Con won the national championship, obviously their hard work, but they were lethal on set pieces. Yeah. They were great on set pieces in the regular season. They were great on set pieces throughout the NESCAC tournament, and they were amazing at set pieces in the NCAA tournament. So, no, 100%. No, you would never bet on 5-4. I wouldn't have even bet on 2-1. I would have bet 1-0 or 0-0 penalty kicks because that's the way. That's like the trend of soccer in November when it's 25 degrees out and it's freezing cold and it's the second game in 2 days and there's that much tension, and for whatever reason the tension went a way that it very rarely goes, and 5-4.
Oh my gosh. I was going to say, like, at that point in the season, right, the concern is always your defensive posture and making sure that you don't let up anything. So my thinking was, these are 2 teams that are going to play mistake-free in the back. It's just, so I was like, 0-0, 1-1. Like I could have foreseen. It's on the corners too. I thought, oh my gosh, both teams are gonna score on corners. Like that was where I thought the goals would come from. But all right. So you go ahead twice. Connecticut ties twice. And it's the second goal they score is minute to half.
I think like 35 seconds.
Something, yeah. Your team obviously disappointed, like, oh my gosh, could have gotten a halftime, but at 2-1, what was your message to your team?
Well, the coach and me initially, like, again, when you've done this for a while, like you think, wow, like this con team has something about them, right? Tufts, like we all year long found a way to win, but the coach in you is like, okay, I know how this game works. We're up 1-0, we're up 2-1, like we're supposed to win this game, and this con team there's something about them where they are just tough. They are tough-minded. They are not giving
going
up.
down without the fight. Yeah.
They are not. And so you're impressed, but obviously you're not going to tell your team that, right? My message, which obviously didn't work because we went from 2-2 at halftime to 5-2 down 20 minutes later. I think my message was we're fine. It's 2-2. If the score was 0-0 right now, every single one of us would feel absolutely fine, right? Just go win the next 45 minutes and you're going to the Final Four, or win the next 65 minutes or on penalties or whatever it may be. So my message was we're fine. But obviously, again, as a coach, you don't want this to be part of it, but the psychological impact it has.
Yeah.
Your team where 35, I mean, I'm not going to say any names, but like we had the ball, a chance to just kick the ball out of bounds with 45 seconds left.
Yeah.
Instead, like a weak left-footed clearance up the field, they playing across a guy, the ball ends up in the box, bouncing around. Their kid hits an amazing shot into the top corner. So, you know how that impacts your team and how that impacts the other team. And obviously it continued to impact us 15 minutes into the second half. So again, like you ask, like, what are those regrets? Like maybe at halftime, I don't know, I should have been singing and dancing or running around or screaming or whatever. It's not my nature to scream. Like I'm more of a build confidence guy. And I thought we were fine. I genuinely thought we would win the game at halftime.
Yeah. So I mean, remarkably, those first 15 minutes or 20 minutes, they come out and score and make it 5-2. And you have 25 minutes left in the game. What was your thinking when they got that fifth one? Was it like at this point let everything go and let's just go after it? Or I mean, were you thinking like, oh my gosh, the game? Not that you would, but the game's over, or I don't see how we come back.
Yeah. I mean, you certainly start to have those thoughts. I mean, the third goal they scored from 20 yards, crossbar down, half volley. I mean, I'm a Manchester City supporter, and I watched yesterday in their Champions League game, Bernardo Silva scored a goal. It was a half volley, crossbar down. And it reminded me, I think the con goal was better. And so again, there's like these things that happen, right? And soccer is crazy. And so, 5-2. I mean, I certainly wasn't going to take off our seniors, right? Like this was their team. So we're seniors are on, the super seniors are on, the regular seniors are on. Let's throw them out there. But you have that thought for 2 minutes of, man, what am I going to say to these guys who came, postponed their lives to come back and try to win a national championship? And you hope that they, anyway, that crosses your mind. And then all of a sudden it's 5-3. And then truly, I think it was 45 or 60 seconds or 90 seconds. It was 5-4.
With 20 minutes at that point.
Yeah, and there's 20 minutes left. And so you're actually trying at that point, trying to decide if, okay, there's 20 minutes left, we're down 1. Like, do we need to be a little more cautious here so it doesn't become 6-4? And we never did. For sure, we never did. And we didn't change anything from 5-2 to the end of the game. We didn't change a thing. We just went 4-2-4. Ian Daly started to push forward from right back, and that's like the one question, because he, you can put him higher as a winger. But you feel like with him, one of the reasons he has such success is he shows up a little bit later, and also kind of playing 4-2-4. He kept getting the ball out wide, and he was open, and so he could make things happen. Open. So we felt like if we put him up higher, there'd just be defenders and more players close to him. So we just wanted him in space, and so we left it. Yes, I mean, I've had one other experience like this at Ithaca College. We were down the last game of the regular season, and I can't remember if it was 2017 or 2018. We were down 3-0 to Vassar with 20 minutes left, and we came back to win 4-3 in regulation. And so I'd had one other moment like this, which just, so I think I don't know, it's just weird, crazy stuff happens in soccer. But certainly when we got it to 5-4 for about 10 minutes, I was convinced we'd win. We tie it up, and who knows, maybe you go to penalties or whatnot. It was like with 10 minutes left, you kind of felt some of the air let out, and all of a sudden we
started to tire. Like, I don't know if that's the right, but just watching the video or watching the game from here, it just looked, you could just see they had expended so much energy to get to the 5-4 and trying to get that fifth that the clock just got too long on them, right? And it just, you could see legs getting tired and they weren't making the runs as crisp as they were. And
and there was a moment, and I've seen the goals. I haven't watched the entire game. I can't watch it in real time. I've watched the goals that we gave up. I've watched the goals that we've scored, but I haven't actually watched like the second half. I will at some point, but there was a chance right after we made it 5-4 that I think like 8 times out of 10 we score, and that one didn't go in. I can't remember if a defender blocked it or if the keeper made a save, but there was a chance where I just thought, oh, there it is, the fifth goal, there it is, and then it didn't happen. And you do have that moment where
it's like, oh, that was it. That's where you just sort of think like that was the opportunity that's gonna either make or break, right? Like that's It was. I mean, it was remarkable. I think that it was the first time I had watched all season where there was that stretch of the 20 minutes or so where Con looked up against the ropes, like they were up against the ropes, and I mean, like you said, maybe not the last 10 minutes, but that first 10 minutes, it looked like a prize fighter in the corner just getting pummeled. And I was surprised at how resilient they were, right? Like just when you thought, okay, this is it, they're going to break, somebody would, like you said, just be tough as nails and win the ball and clear it out, and you guys would start over again. But what I mean, just to wrap that up, like what did you tell your team at the end? Like when game's over, Con's running around, what did you tell your team?
God, it makes me like even think about I just told them how proud I was of them. I probably say too much publicly, but in full transparency, I shed a tear, and I just told them how proud I was of them, and I was just sorry. And there's, again, I've done this for long enough, 17, 18 years as a head coach. So like, there's nothing you can say, right? You've got all these guys who know that they were good enough to win a national championship, as any team in the Sweet 16 could have won a national championship, right? And it takes a ton of talent, it takes a lot of hard work, it takes a lot of luck. But when you're talking to a team, and they knew they could have won a national championship, and that was what their focus was, and all of a sudden it was over. And for Tufts guys, like that's even bigger, because all they've known is winning a national championship.
Yeah.
This is silly, but we're organizing our banquet right now, and I was talking to one of our players yesterday about just kind of like, again, those things where you're trying to put your own input on the team, but also trying to give some of these seniors like a similar experience. So for our banquet coming up in a month, I was like, I was asking what they've done in years past. Mm-hmm. He made a joke. He was like, well, then the last thing that we do is we get our national championship rings. I was like, well, we won't be doing that this year. And he didn't, like, not with any cockiness, just not
any malice
Our kids are very, very humble. More like giving it to me. Like I didn't come in and help the team win a national championship.
Right.
Got total respect for it. It was Ian Daly, so I'll give it back to him.
Yeah. That's awesome, though. I love, I wish I could have said that, but
no. I just told them how proud, and again, sports are crazy, and when you're looking back on like what does all this mean, right? And don't get me wrong, I think winning is really, really important, and I'm always a coach, so like, we do a lot of in Division III and in the NESCAC, and sometimes like you don't talk about winning in Division III, and I've never been one of the, like, I think you can prioritize winning. I don't think it makes you a bad person to want to win and want to beat your opponent. And I think in life you're going to have to, like wanting to win and wanting to be successful. I don't think there's any shame in that whatsoever. And so, I just kind of share with them, like, obviously we want to win a national championship. We wanted to be in the Final Four. We wanted that experience. I'm really sad. I'm really sorry that you're not going to get that experience. I really wanted it for you. Selfishly, I really wanted it. I've never been in a Final Four. And I wanted to provide that for our coaches and all of that. And I just told them, like, the legacy that you're going to leave here, obviously as a team that's won 3 NESCAC championships, 2 national championships, and then the 2 years that you didn't win. Yeah, they were, 2 national championships, 2 Elite Eights. So like pretty darn good. Yeah. They're pretty good Division III soccer players. But the lasting legacy that they're going to leave is having been down 5-2 with 20 minutes left, and every person there thinking, holy cow, this is how this ends for these guys. 5-2, maybe 6-2, 7-2 at that point. And instead it didn't. And they battled back with everything that they had, and they truly almost came back. And at the end, were disappointed to lose a game that 20 minutes earlier they had to be fair, had been getting crushed in, and we're losing 5-2. And so, like, their lasting legacy for me will always be that group who didn't give up at 5-2 down with their careers ending, and they had that toughness and that desire, and just kept fighting for one another.
I'll just say credit to them, because when Connecticut scores the fifth, you did feel like when they scored that fifth, they were going to score a sixth, and they could go for like, you didn't think that there was an end to it. And then to turn it around, and it sort of follows what I'd said about your program and when you played. It always struck me that Tufts had this switch that you think they're playing well, and it's a competitive game, and then some point the switch goes off and be like, we have to win, or we have to play to win. And the dynamic completely changes, and you turn a game around. And I haven't seen anybody else do that. And that game, that when they went 5-2, and I'm thinking they're going to go for 6 and this is going to be a real drubbing, that switch went off. And then suddenly it's like, if you wouldn't have watched up until that point, you would have thought the better team, right? Like Tufts, they deserved the win, right? It was just, to me, it was a remarkable display. I said, not having seen something like that before. So credit to you guys, and I'm sorry that was the case. I talked to my first interview. Coach Burke was gracious enough, and I even joked. I was like, or joked. It's like, oh, did you think you had it in the bag at 5-2? And he goes, not against Tufts ever, but because I thought, like I said, it was over. But okay, so let's, if it's okay, we'll just shift to recruiting, because that's what I try to do is talk to all the coaches to get everybody's perspective, and hopefully people will watch, they understand. It's a pretty competitive process, right? That they have to go with their eyes wide open. So let me just ask right off the bat, when you go out for recruiting, and knowing Tufts is Tufts, right? It's kind of like when I was talking to Coach Appleby at Johns Hopkins, right? Johns Hopkins is Johns Hopkins, right? You can't go out and just get the best player because it could be a 2.0 student, right? You're not going to get them. I mean, do you look for players, or do you look for positions? So are you looking for the kid who can get into Tufts, or are you looking for, I need a right back?
Yeah, and take this all with a grain of salt, because I'm still sort of establishing how I do it at Tufts, right? Having taken the job during a pandemic, and the first year of recruiting been on video, and so still learning, and I think it'll take a few years to really establish, kind of what my recruiting style and beliefs will be here, and then hopefully always, changing with the times as things become, things do evolve. I think for me, I've always been someone who looks for talent first and finds a way to fit that player into a system. And again, part of it is, I know some coaches are very, very system driven, and they know exactly the system that they want to play, maybe regardless of the players that they have, or the type of players that they have. And that's not me. I've always been, we're going to recruit the best players that we can. And obviously there's things you look for, and you want guys who, have some principles and some characteristics that you want in your players. But I'm not so system stuck that, I don't need to play a 4-3-3 for the next 20 years. If the best setup for us is a 3-4-3, because that's the personnel we have, then we'll play a 3-4-3, and we'll figure out how to be successful at it. So for me, I definitely look at player more than position, because you just find so often in college, certainly kids have played a position their whole life, and then they get to college and they play a completely different position anyway. So having some versatility, I think goal scorer is something that I always look for. But a goal scorer can be a winger, a goal scorer can be a center forward, a goal scorer could be a central midfielder. Our leading goal scorers are right back. So those are important things. But I think we try and again, I don't know if this is right or wrong, but when we watch games, we actually don't look at grades at all. We just try to watch the game first, and then we sort out. And again, maybe this is inefficient, and we should do it the other way, but we truly are trying to watch players, and then we'll sort out. And obviously, sometimes you hear that a kid has a 2.0 or something, and so cross that kid off. But for the most part, we truly, and I'll give my assistant Mark Waterman a ton of credit, and he does a ton of our recruiting, and is really good at it, has a good eye for it, and watches a ton of film, and that's his belief too. Like, let's just watch games, let's look for the best players, and then we'll figure out if they're smart enough.
Smart, yeah. That's, you're always in a predicament, right? Like, just interesting how that gets navigated in the recruiting process, because, like I said, your Tufts is a different animal than all the NESCAC teams and Johns Hopkins and MIT. Have to approach it a lot differently for those reasons. Let me ask you something, because and this is not just at Tufts, just your experience in general over the years of being a head coach. Like, when you see a high school player coming to college, what do you think they're missing, or their lack of understanding about the college game is? Because again, this is just purely anecdotal. It just seems to me that the understanding and the ability of high school players, their own belief is a lot higher than what, when they get to college, the reality ends up being. So,
yeah. I think I don't know the exact answer. And, you often think, we actually had a good experience with this year, which has been impactful for me. You often think like the players that are going to be most ready are those that are physically most ready, right? And so when you're recruiting an 18-year-old high school player, you think like, this guy's 6'2", 185. He'll probably fit in very quickly. So this year we had the experience of our best field player first year, for most of the season, Ethan Feigen, is 5'7", 130 pounds. And he plays in the most physical conference in the country in Division III. And somehow he found a way to get on the field in every game and play a ton of minutes and be really impactful for us. And we think will be a really good player for us in the future. So it's, I think it's mentality more than anything. I have always contended that too many players kind of come into college and have already chalked away that first year, and they just kind of accept that might not be their year. And they're not often happy when it's not their year, but somewhere in the back of their mind, they're just thinking, you know what, I'm gonna be here, I'm gonna train, I'm gonna go through, not that they just go through the motions, but like they don't necessarily come in thinking that they're going to play. And I don't know exactly, again, if I did, I'd be making more money doing something else if I actually had an answer here. But there's something about the player who just comes in and they have the belief that they're going to be good enough, that find a way to be good enough. I don't know what that is, but I would argue it's something more to do with the psychology of a player and the mentality of a player than it is about the physical side of it. Again, like, we play in arguably the most physical conference in the country, and our best freshman in the NESCAC was a 5'7", 130 pound kid.
I love to hear that, by the way. I love to hear that, because my own kids, and I always said them, at some point soccer matters. Like, how you play matters. You don't have to be huge, you don't have to be whatever. It's how you play and what you're able to do on the field that's going to ultimately matter. So for you to say something like that really warms the heart, Hey, that's awesome. Some kindred spirit. But what's the best way for a high school kid looking to play at Tufts? What's the best way to get your attention?
Yeah, obviously playing in front of us, whether that's, guys send us their schedules, come to our camps. Camps are really impactful for us. I certainly advocate. I think the best thing that players can do is attend the school-specific camps. I think those are really useful, and often those are smaller. Like, we limit ours to about 60 players, and so at the end of a 2-day period, we truly know who all the players are, and we, because I know people are coming from all over the country or all over the world and spending money to attend these things, so we genuinely try to know who every player is, so we can give them some sense of feedback. It's interesting. I say this too, not being afraid to say it to a group of players. When we hold one of these camps, if you have 60 kids there, we have 2 camps a weekend, 3 weekends of that a year. All of a sudden, you're roughly like 360 players coming through your camp. And like, how many are you actually taking? 5, 6, 7, 8, right? So the most important thing that a player can do is be really good at soccer. And that's like something that gets lost in it sometimes. I think you need to send us your schedule. You need to send us full game videos. You need to play at tournaments and play for good teams and be in front of us. You need to attend our camps, but ultimately you need to be really good at soccer and stand out. And I always say that now. I'll do a thing with the parents that come to camps and clinics and things, and just, again, and you sometimes are like, man, I wonder how they're going to take this, knowing they've all like flown from all over the country and spent money to be here. And you're telling them, like, realistically, maybe one person that's here is going to end up on our team. But again, like, we had kids last summer that we had 2 players that are on, we will be on our team in 2022 who came out of nowhere. We didn't know who they were, and they attended our camps and they were fantastic. And probably our fault for not knowing who they were before, but like, truly, they just showed up at our camps and were the best player there by a mile. And those are the guys that we ended up recruiting.
All right. So if you can, or if you want me to, in the video down below, I'll put all whatever links, if you're if you're okay with that, and how best to get in touch with you. And and look, that about wraps it up. Like, we've this is a good marathon session. I'm okay with that. Really, really appreciate you taking the time today. Really do. It's part of me doing this is just because I like the back and forth and the thinking about these things, and so I do appreciate you taking the time and giving us insight into Tufts soccer, and probably one of your more painful memories at Tufts so far.
I mean, the most painful memory for sure. Sorry. For sure. No, I appreciate. I'm quite self-deprecating, and I find the best way to look at painful things in life is to laugh about them. So, yeah, I mean, hopefully I never coach a 5-4 game either direction ever again in my life, and I'd be okay with that.
I joked with Coach Burke about, like, I'm like, I don't see any gray hairs, because that game would have given me gray hair. Not that I already have enough, but would have given me more gray hairs. So I think it did watching it. So
I'm trending that way myself. So I understand.
All right, Coach. Thank you very much. Really do appreciate it. And we'll have to do this just before the season. They'll have to do it again.
Sounds great. Thanks for everything. Thanks for your support of Division III soccer. We appreciate it.
Thank you.
All right. Yeah.